Hi everybody, my name is Mark, and this is my story from the soul. I was born 1985 in Korea. If you are unaware, in the 1980s in Korea, it was pretty messy. There was a huge financial crisis. A lot of people couldn't afford having a family. So many times children were born and they were unable to be raised with a family. So I, even though this sounds pretty special, amongst adoptees, this is pretty typical. I was found in a basket on the street, at least what the social worker says. I was found in the basket in the street with my birthday and my Korean name, Choi Young-il. And that was in Shilim, Seoul. And I was taken to a police station. And then after that, I stayed in an orphanage for a while. And then I was adopted and sent over. I guess the whole adoption process happens because my parents chose it, my adoptive parents. They were not able to have children on their own, so they adopted once before, my older brother. He is domestic adopted from Pennsylvania. 10 years later, they decided to adopt again. They haven't really explained why they adopted from Korea, but at the same time, during the 1980s, 1990s, Korea was just, sending out babies left and right. So that was a big thing. If you were thinking of adoption, Korea came up a lot in a lot of prospective parents' discussions. My life growing up in white suburbia, small town Pennsylvania. That was it. Very Anglo-Caucasian population, and I would be the only Asian kid growing up, going through school, through elementary school, middle school. High school was quite large, couple thousand kids, but there was just maybe a handful of Asians, probably less than 10, and I would be the only adopted out of them, so I couldn't really identify with them that much. But me growing up, I was just your homegrown American boy. I worked on 3 farms. I, fed cows, I baled hay, I planted and harvested crops. And then that would be for the off season, and on the on season, I would play American football. Yeah, just grew up all the way through the education, and then graduated out and went to university in central Pennsylvania, which was also a very small state school and very not as ethnically diverse, I would say. But there were several exchange students, and that's kind of what opened me up to, I guess, the rest of the world. I studied in Italy for a month to study art. I have a background in drawing and painting, and that's also where I met my first Korean friends. In the cafeteria at university, I would be hanging out with my buddies who were, for the most part, white or non-Asian. And at that time, I was a bit different. I had another 20 pounds of muscle on me. I had really long, wavy hair. I had a lip ring, just total dude, bro. And I would have lunch with my friends. And we'd walk by this table of Asians, just this table of clearly Asians, not American Asians, but straight up Asians. And they would look over the shoulder and they would kind of whisper at each other. They're just like, oh, this. And I'm just like, what's with these guys? So I would kind of give them the stink eye like that, and they would kind of just stare back. And that would just go on for a while. And I'm like, what's with these guys? And then we finally had my first house party with a group of my buddies. We gathered as many people as we could, and our house became quite famous for the international group because central Pennsylvania is a bit conservative. So we would have a lot of foreign exchange students, but they would get kicked out of houses for not being American. Yeah. So our house, all the taxi drivers knew the address of our house because all the foreign exchange students, they would come to our house. So we would, man, like in the regular floor, this was like the first party experience that I had that my mind was just blown about other cultures. which is funny because it was in central Pennsylvania in this college guy's house. I was living with these 5 guys. And the first party, like 9 p.m. rolls around. I'm like, hey, is anybody showing up? Because, you know, in the States, like, that's when you kind of get started, right? And sure enough, 11:30 rolls around, midnight. That's when people started coming in. We had people from Spain, Russia, Bulgaria, Ukraine, Portugal, and of course, Asian countries, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. And that was just fascinating. On the main floor, we would have all of our Latin friends. They were dancing like merengue and salsa and bachata, like on the main floor. And I was like, what is going on? And then I would go down in the basement, and then our Russian housemate, he's playing like house music, and it's all everybody just dancing house and everything. And so I was just like, what is going on here? And then finally, that group of Asians show up, and you know, I had a couple in me, so I was able to, I guess let my feelings come out. And I pulled one of them aside, and I said, hey man, like, what's your deal? Like, what's your problem with me? And they're just like, oh, no, we have no problem. We think you're actually very interesting, and you're fascinating that you're just this Asian guy hanging out with all these white people. So after that, we became super close, and I became really close with that group of those group of students, especially the Korean group, because they heard my story about being Korean adopted. And that kind of started lighting a fire under me and thinking about possibly coming to visit or live in Korea. So as I mentioned earlier, I had Korean friends back in my university, and they would really kind of just talk about how it's my duty to go back. This is after a couple bottles of soju. And, you know, they were just like, you're my brother, you just go check it out, right? And so, yeah, I thought about it for a long time. And at that time, it's 2008, 2009. And if you aren't aware, at that time, teaching in Korea was hot. That was like the golden age of English teaching in Korea. I didn't even know that. It wasn't even about me being Korean adopted or anything. I just heard of people going over to Korea to teach English. You know, you just finished university, you're not quite sure what to do. So I really thought of that. I'm like, man, okay, I'm really thinking about going to Korea. These academies, hagwons, these academies offer these packages, offer housing, lodging, and for a poor college kid who just graduated, they offer a pretty good amount of money per month. It was just a matter of, okay, how can I get to Korea now? Which hagwon can I find? Which academy can I find? Or by what means? And I had one in mind that kind of fell through. Another friend found this program, and she's like, hey, you should just check this out. So it's a program that is kind of like a homecoming program for Korean adoptees, where they will have Korean adoptees come back to Korea, teach a little bit of English, but then they also live with a host family, and you also get a stipend. You get a little bit of money for it. And so I really thought about it. I signed up, and before I knew it, I was headed over. And yeah, that was quite the experience. So after a few months, that program was up, and you know, I could always go back to the States, but I essentially burned the ships, right? I came over. It was a one-way ticket for me. So then at that time, it was just like survival, trying to pick up different knick-knack jobs. I would teach business English at high conglomerates. I would teach classes. I would teach vice presidents. Then I taught some children on tutoring. And I was even a bartender for a bit. And then I landed a more steady job at a private elementary school. So that was more of a steady job. I'm still at that school today. Yeah, they treat me well, and it's a nice school, nice prestigious school. Just imagine what it's like to be a teenager growing up and figuring out your own identity, but then just being like the only Asian kid, right, in a family or in a school. and what you are told, or what's subliminally kind of told to you, what is attractive and unattractive, or what is good and what is bad. Yeah, I had a lot of issues being who I was growing up, because I would completely be envious of my friends who were tall, blonde hair, blue-eyed, quarterback kind of friends. They would get all the girls, they would get all the popularity or the grades, and I wasn't even like the ideal Asian stereotype, right? It wasn't like I had Asian parents to, like, you know, get those grades. I definitely had some big issues. Like, many times I wished I wasn't Asian. Many times I thought I wish I could have just blended in. It wasn't until that I met other Korean adoptees, of who are my friends, but also I've worked with for different projects or different camps, adoptee camps, where I've kind of come to discover my identity. And that wasn't until I was like early 20s. I worked at Korean adoptee camps where the staff are generally adopted for the most part, and then the campers are adopted. Even the leadership is adopted. So that was pretty interesting to kind of have that community there. And it was a good camp in the sense that most of the time it was just a camp, but then 2 hours a day, 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening, we would talk about identity issues or adoption issues. So we would talk about what it's like to be in a transracial family, what it's like to be to deal with racism, what it's like to go back to your home country, or what have you thought about it. So that really helped me grow a lot with my identity. But today, I've been in Korea for about 10 years, and I'll tell you, yeah, I still have kind of, I wouldn't say issues, but just I still have a lot of thought about what I am, right? Because nothing against this country, Korea, but they're very good at telling you what you are and what you are not. And, you know, coming back to Korea, I came to the realization that I was like, like, whichever country I'm in or wherever I'm at, I will never be 100% considered from that country. Do you know what I mean? Like, when I live back in the States, people will, maybe one of their first guess is like, oh, he's not American, or his English is good, right? But actually coming back to Korea, it's the same thing. You know, people don't really consider me Korean, or they don't even like to mention that, like, say the word 입양 or adopted. I have some friends that said to me, wow, it's really interesting that you just say that you're adopted, because there's kind of this negative stigma of shame and behind that. So yeah, I guess identity now is tough too, because I could sit here and be like, well, I'm just me, and me is me, and I feel, and in a sense, I am kind of embracing that. If you look at me, also, I mean, it's not like I'm trying to fit in, right? This is actually what I look like in the street. Like, shaved head, I got this like beard, so I'm not gonna look like your average Korean, I would say, Korean male. But even if I did, you know, if it's the language, or if it's as soon as somebody finds out about my background, it's kind of weird. Yeah, it's kind of like you're never really fully, I don't want to say accepted, but you're never fully considered a Korean, or you're never fully considered an American, or German, or French. Is that a good thing or bad thing? I don't know. It just is. So that's just how it is. Each adoptee that I've met has their own way to deal with adoption and their own thoughts. Advice for adoptees is that understand that your story is very unique in itself, but also so are other adoptees. Their situation and their process of adoption and their process of identity is going to be different than yours. And instead of being upset at that person because they have a different opinion or a different background, I'd like to hope that we as adoptee communities can get together and productively discuss and argue about these issues. Yeah, because there's so many of us out there. There are. But each case and each individual treats it their own way. So respect yourself, but also respect that others may not have it like you.
I hope that you guys enjoyed that episode of Stories from the Soul. Be on the lookout for more episodes, and hopefully you guys are gaining insight from this series. Make sure you follow me on social media at SkySeti, and also subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, and be sure to hit that notification bell. Until next time, we'll see you in the next video, and remember to always seize the day.